Well, welcome everyone to today's episode of TMI Advice You Didn't Want. Today we're going to go full out TMI. Like we were just talking before this episode and we were like, let's just talk about all the taboo stuff that you're not allowed to talk about when you're a kid and really what that does for you as an adult and just talk about being more curious as an individual, whether you're a kid or an adult. So, in
Mhm.
case we haven't met, I'm Karen. I'm one of the co-hosts. Wow, that's a hard word to say when you're tired. I'm one of the co-hosts here at TMI.
And my name is Ashley, and I love TMI. And this is how the whole conversation started. Was I was having a conversation with a friend, and I was like, "I can tell you, but it's TMI." And to me, that just is like that makes it juicy. I'm like, "Yay, the
Right?
intrigue and the fun!" And she's like, "Oh no, I don't want to know." And I literally, it was like the emoji of a brain blowing up. I was like, "What? Someone
Yeah.
doesn't want to know TMI?" Like to me, that's the good stuff.
Yeah, like that just doesn't compute in my little brain because I am so curious. You and I both are so curious where we're just like, uh, what can't you tell me? I need to know now. And it turns into this thing where I start thinking about it and it's like, well, what could it be? Like I have
Yep.
to figure it out. So it is
Mhm.
completely an anomaly for somebody to say to me, oh, I don't want to know. Like for
Yeah.
your friend, for you to be like, oh, I have this really cool thing that I do, but it might be too much information for you. And for her to just be like, nah, I'm good. I don't need to know. Like, that's so unheard of, in my opinion. And I think that that stems from, like, correct me if you think something different, but I do think that that stems from childhood stuff. Like, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, I would say yes, but as a child, like I hid my period, like getting my period from my friends, from my mom. Like I stole her pads. I used toilet paper instead of pads and tampons as much as I could. So she didn't notice that her tampons and pads were significantly disappearing compared to before.
Significantly.
Yeah. And so I think it took me like 6 months or more, but for sure 6 months to tell people that I had my period.
And
And
like,
I
what do
was
you
really,
think caused that for you? Like, what made you be like, oh, I gotta hold back. I can't talk about these things. Cause like, I feel like that's really common for people. And you
yeah.
and I are just like, we're just gonna freaking talk about it, you know? But like, what holds us back? Like, what is that?
Well, I think my dad has always been like a we don't say periods, we don't talk periods. Like, typical masculine, like, oh, we don't go there kind of guy. And now it's quite fun. But when I was younger, like if I had to buy tampons, he wouldn't even go into the store with me.
Mm.
If I asked him but to buy me like even a girly like teen magazine, he was like, no. Or he would pay for his stuff and then he would pass me his debit card and I could buy my magazine myself. So my
Okay.
dad was very much like that. My mom, like I seen her naked growing up. I seen her with like period stuff growing up. Like it wasn't like she completely hid that from me, but she never had those conversations with me. We had sex ed at school. I knew I was gonna get it. Even for the bra thing, like I started developing boobs in grade 4, and I remember
Yeah,
like
that's bananas. I'm super tall, so I was flat chested for years.
but here's the thing, like that's what's so weird. So Aubrey, and so this might be a whole like the whole screen situation, the whole like people are evolving faster and going through puberty faster. Aubrey is tiny, like skin and bones kind of tiny. She takes off after Derek like unbelievably, and she's tall. Like it's hard to say like because like I was the tallest girl in grade 4 and 5 too, and now I'm short as hell.
I was
But
always tall as fuck. Let's be honest. I'm 6'2". You guys can't tell, but I'm fucking tall.
yeah, and I was the tallest kid in school until I think grade 7. Then people started surpassing me, and I never grew past grade 5. But I was just the first one to get there. And yeah, but Aubrey has boobs. Like,
That's
um,
bananas.
yeah. And She's definitely going through puberty. Like Derek has, I can't smell. And Derek said like she needs deodorant, like he can smell her BO and that kind of stuff. So yeah, so she would be grade 4 too. And we were doing Irish dancing for St. Patrick's Day in grade 4. And I was an Irish dancer, but I was wearing this big baggy lime green t-shirt. I remember it to a T. And my friends came up to me, they're like, your boobs are moving, you need to wear a bra. And
Oh,
I was like,
damn.
yeah. And I was like, oh boy, okay. And I didn't have a bra. I didn't want to ask my parents for a bra. And so I wore a bikini top bathing suit the next day to school.
Oh my
And
God.
it was too small because this is now March. So it was a bathing suit from like, well, previous summer. And so when I got home from school, I took it off. My mom saw me taking it off. We lived in a 4-level split, but she saw like me in the basement and she's like, what are you doing? Why did you wear that? I'm like, oh, my friend said I needed a bra. And then the week later, she came home with bras for me and showed me them in front of my friends with my aunt. And I was like mortified, like,
Yeah,
no. And I don't know, so much has changed. Like I don't even wear bras now. I talk about
right.
all that stuff so openly. I was always super weird in school, but that puberty stage was like a really tough time where I was really boxed in. And then I was like, okay, now this is over. Now this is normal. And then I talked about it all the time.
Yeah, I think you point to something really important, and I think that this answers my question that I had earlier. There is a lot of, especially when we're younger, shame that comes from our peers. And
Mhm.
when we're younger, we don't always know how to deal with it. We don't always know. We don't always realize, okay, they're allowed to have their opinion. I'm allowed to just be me. We don't have that filter as a child. We don't have that logic filter. And then as we get older, we start to go, why does it matter? Or most of us do. You and I did. How's that? Like, there are still people, and obviously, that friend that you were talking about, there's that shame filter of like, oh, I'm not sure I want to talk about that because there could be shame involved. Like,
Mhm. Yeah.
there, especially for myself, I look back at my childhood and talk about not being allowed to talk about certain things, like
Yeah.
boys having erections. I didn't fully understand what things like a clitoris was. And like, this is something that we were talking about before the podcast too, because you have a totally different take on how you're raising your kids. Like,
Yeah.
I was raised in the environment where it was like, we talked about, like, I remember my mom having the period talk, and I think I remember the sex talk, but
Mhm.
it only really happened once. It
Yeah.
wasn't like an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
um Things like even like cuss words, that was like a no, those words are not allowed. It was shameful if you use them. And I mean, listen, I grew up in a heavily Christian environment,
Mhm.
so that was just completely shamed in general. All things to do with sex, all things to do with profanity, anything that was just not not normal, I guess you could say, air quote normal, we couldn't talk about it. Like, it was shameful to talk about it. And I think that a lot of people probably are brought up in similar environments where it's like, no, we don't talk about that. That's not a thing. Like, you talk about your dad, where he's
Mhm.
like, we don't talk about periods. And it's
Mhm.
like, it's a normal bodily function. Like,
Yeah.
just like going to the bathroom is a
Well,
normal
and
bodily
yeah,
function.
that's the weirdest part. Like he knows I do coffee enemas and he'll be like, oh, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, coffee enema. He's like, oh man, I don't get why you do that. And then so I'll be talking to him on the phone and every once in a while I'm like, oh, I'm just going to the bathroom. And he's like, oh, me too. And I'm like, oh, so we're both sitting here talking to each other while we're pooping? He's like, yep. And so it's like that is normal.
Right.
Like but it's a female thing and that's what makes it different. And yeah, if I'm like, oh, my period's really hurting, I have cramps, he's like, don't talk about that. Like, I don't want to hear about that. And I'm just like, okay, too bad. Like, that's how it is. And yeah, like, I think that a big part of our Western culture is over sexualizing things.
100%.
And also where people don't even understand like what is normal,
Mhm.
like even just like we were talking about this on a previous podcast about like having sex dreams. Like my partner didn't even know that that was a thing.
Which
um
is crazy. Like
yeah.
how a dude doesn't have sex dreams. I'm still blown away by that.
And so yeah, it's just like, but like he thought I was joking when I told him. Like, and he never had those kind of conversations with friends or family or anything. And so even really for me, like I didn't talk about it much to know like how common it was, but I don't shy away from any of that kind of stuff. And I don't with the kids either. I have not had the sex talk with them. I know I have to have it soon. But it hasn't, like we've had the like a female has an egg and a man has a seed and it fertilizes the egg and it becomes a baby. That's the same with chickens and everything. And that's why we can eat the chicken eggs that we get from the store because they're not fertilized. So we've had all that kind of stuff. They know I have my period because the egg is being released because it wasn't fertilized. So they get all that kind of thing, but they don't understand the penis goes in the vagina. Like that
Mhm.
concept is not there yet. But like we were talking the other night and we were talking about body parts with a game that you say like the first letter that comes in the game. And so things like anus, clitoris, erection, boner, penis, vagina, all those words came up in this game. And my mom's like, oh my gosh, like that's crazy. And I'm like, well, it's actually really healthy because those are body parts. They're
Mhm.
not bad words. They're not sexual things unless you make it that way. And
Mhm.
so now they're hearing these words and they're knowing what it is, and they're hearing that they're part of their body. And I think that's really healthy. However,
Yeah.
we did tell our 5-year-old he couldn't repeat erection or boner at school or penis. He'll get in trouble for all of those things.
Yeah, because he's at a point probably where he doesn't really fully understand how to use them yet. So, but I think that that's really important that especially like I'm not a parent, but this is something that I've given a lot of thought to if I ever became a parent, which I'm not planning on, but if that ever happens, I have always been of the mindset that you teach kids what things are called. You
Mhm.
don't teach
Yeah.
them, oh, somebody like this is my hoo hoo and this is my wah wah. Like, no, that's ridiculous. If
Yeah.
somebody is going to like touch my child, I want them to be able to say how someone else touched them, where they touched them without, so that everybody knows exactly what happened, so that there's no question, there's no possible assumption or misassumption of what the child is trying to say. And I feel like when we try to squish those words under the rug, we're really like not doing kids a service at that point because they're not able to express themselves properly. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely teaching them the time and place. Like with your 5-year-old, you don't want him just screaming out penis during kindergarten. Like that's not going to work.
No,
But when is he going to do it? How is he going to say it?
well, and it's more they don't need to say it just as like a random funny thing at school. It's to know this is called a penis, this is like part of my vagina. Like I still to this day do not know all of the body parts that I have on my body that a lot of people know. Like those aren't things that I know. And I think that that is crazy, really. Obviously I can change that anytime, but like I want my kids to know what their body is doing and that it's normal and that they have a safe place to talk about it because it's not a shameful, embarrassing topic.
Mm-mm.
So like even my daughter, like, she was saying like, because her boobs grew differently, so she had one boob grow first and then the second one, and she was talking about that with me and Derek, and she's like, yeah, now my boobs are the same size, like they both are growing at the same time. And Derek was like, yeah, and soon you'll have like pubic hair, so you'll have hair on your armpits and your vagina and on your legs. And she kind of like smiled, and he's like, what's that for? She's like, I already have some on my vagina.
Ha! That's funny. So
And
she just knows.
well, we've had this conversation because we really want it to not be a shame thing. Like I
No.
experienced it and it was like an awkward, I don't know when I'm supposed to shave, how I'm supposed to shave. Like it wasn't a fun process.
Mm-mm.
And so I don't want that. So we were like, you all are gonna have hair on your face, or not Aubrey as much, but
Yeah, hopefully not.
and then the boys like your chest, and we joke with Aubrey that she's gonna grow chest hair, and like, like we make it very light and very safe and all of that. And so like the fact that she's able to tell her father that she's starting to grow pubic hair on her vagina as like a casual conversation at the supper table, like that, I would have died first.
Yeah,
Like
I would never have had that conversation with my parents ever. That wasn't a
not even my
thing.
mom. No.
Mm-mm.
And probably not even my friends. Like I said, like it took me like a good over a year before I felt comfortable with all the changes my body had went through. And I'm like, how special is that for her
Mm-hmm.
that she feels safe and normal and all that kind of stuff. However, when I did first tell her about periods, she thought I was pranking her.
No, babes, this is for real. Sorry about all that. It happens every month.
Have I ever told you that story? Because it is like
No,
hilarious. Oh my God.
no, you should share if you can.
So my kids, I don't know if they're like this at both homes, but they will walk into any bathroom. Like we don't really close doors when we go to the bathroom. They don't, we don't. It's not like a rule. It just we're all too lazy kind of thing. And I'll have kids like come into the bathroom and be like, I just wanted to give you a hug. I'm like, okay, I'm
Oh,
pooping.
okay,
Sure.
thank you. Yeah.
And so they that's just so normal to them. And then, again, I would rather that than it be like, oh no, like like I don't
Hmm.
want the shame around all of it. And it's all discretion. If they want to shut the door, they can. And if they do ever, like I knock and say, hey, are you cool with me coming in or do you want me to wait? And like always giving them that consent. Um, but anyways, the doors are usually open. And the one time Aubrey came in and she saw that I had blood on a pad. And she was like, what's that? And I'm like, oh, that's my period. And she's like, what? And I'm like, well, females' periods bleed, or sorry, females' vaginas bleed once a month. And when you're older, and it bleeds for a few days. And that's something you can look forward to. And she's like,
Yay! Aunt Flo's here.
yeah. Like, no, 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 that you're lying. And I'm like, no, I'm serious. You can see the blood. Like,
This
and I
is
think I
real.
even like took it like further and actually like wiped and was like, see, there's blood. Like, this is blood. And she was just like, what? And so then I finished going to the bathroom and we went downstairs, and Atticus was there too. And she's like, why? Why does it bleed? So I explained to her the unfertilized egg, the blood is to release the egg and all that kind of stuff. And then if it gets fertilized, that's when you become pregnant and all of that. So I didn't have any further sex talk than that, but that part. And so she's like thinking like this, and she's like, so, and she really wants me to have kids. So she's like, so if you have your period, that means you can have a baby? And I'm like, yeah. And she goes,
She said, what? I couldn't hear that.
let it
Oh
bleed.
my God.
In that facial expression, like,
Oh my
that
God.
type
That's
of
funny.
voice, let it bleed. I cried. I was sure I fell to the floor and cried
Oh
of
my
like, oh my
God.
gosh. But
Uh,
that's also wonderful. Like it's a funny, fun, like normal thing.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
And the beautiful thing about that is that curiosity is allowed.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing that I feel like a lot of people, myself included, curiosity was not allowed. And
Mhm.
so it creates shame. And so I've talked about this before on this podcast, but I grew up and I was curious about my body and I masturbated.
Mhm.
I was curious. That's how that happened. I literally was like, what's this do? And I went, oh, that's fun. Ha! So literally, that's how that happened. But
Yeah.
like, that was such a shameful thing. I remember in high school, I remember this so vividly because I did it, right? So in high school, I remember she wasn't really my friends. She was just an acquaintance, but she was like saying it very loud and she was saying it to the group of girls that were there. I think this was like Bible class or something like that. We were talking about masturbation and they were talking about how I think the number's higher now, but back then it was lower. I think it was like 1 in 10 females masturbate, right? I can't imagine that that's the number anymore. I feel like it's probably higher than that, but there was 10 of us there and she was looking around the room and that means that she's like, one of us in this room masturbates. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, oh no, I'm that person. And it was
Oh,
just like, that was shameful because this is an environment where we're talking about how that is not allowed. Like
yeah.
it's not allowed to do that at all. So I remember this being such a big deal.
Mhm.
Whenever I like right before I got married, I felt like so much shame around it. I was like, "Oh my God." I'm telling my husband like, oh my God, I'm so sorry I did this. And he's like, what? What are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? That's ridiculous. And I'm like, yeah, but there's just so much shame, especially for females,
Oh
to
yeah.
even mention that word. Like, that word feels gross to a
Yeah.
lot of females. And
Mhm.
it's like, why? Like, it's okay to be curious. It's okay to look into things. And like, I've always been that curious person. And I think that's really one of the biggest reasons that I went through my faith deconstruction because I
Mhm.
started pulling at straws, like pulling at the strings and going, yeah, that doesn't make any sense anymore. I'm not sure I want to keep living like this. And so
Mhm.
it took me years, though,
Mhm.
years to look at it and be like, that doesn't quite add up, but I'm going to keep still doing this, right? Like it's because there was shame involved. The
For sure.
shame of what would happen if I walked away. The
Mhm.
shame of what would happen if my friends find out that I'm not interested in this anymore. What would
Mhm.
happen if my family finds out, right? Like I finally had to let a lot of that go. I ended up telling my sister-in-law, I was like, listen, I'm not into that stuff anymore. It's just not for me. I felt like I didn't really need to share it with my parents though, that I was no longer a Christian, but because it was more for their protection because a lot of times when you say to somebody, "Hey, I'm not a Christian anymore," they're like, "Oh my God, you're going to hell." Like
Yeah.
that, I don't want my parents to feel that way, but I knew my
They
sister-in-law
know
could
that you
handle.
don't go to church.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And they don't either. Like they haven't gone to church in longer than I haven't gone to church, right? Like they stopped going to church because there was issues years ago at many of the churches that they went to when I was growing up. And so I think my parents were like, okay, we're done with the church, but we still believe in God. I
Mhm.
think for them, their curiosity didn't take them far enough. Like that's what it all comes down to, the curiosity and allowing yourself to really fully experience the
Yeah.
shame. And I'm
Mhm.
going to air quote the shame because it's really not shame. It's
Yeah.
what you label as
Mhm.
shame. And this is like we talk about this all the time on TMI advice you didn't want, like your thoughts and your mindset and what are you labeling a certain way? Like
Yeah.
you have to just experience like, okay, I feel shame around this. And
Yeah.
then like asking yourself, well, does this actually serve me to feel shame around this? Or is this just a normal
Mhm.
human body function that can
Yeah.
be beautiful, right?
Mhm.
Like body function or walking away from a religion, whatever, doesn't matter. Like, do I need to actually feel shame around this? Or can I let this go?
Well, we used to play a game. It was a drinking game called Sociables. I don't know if you've ever heard that
I've
before.
never heard of it. No, you're gonna have to tell us what it is.
Well, it's like a card game where each letter represents something that you have to do,
Mm,
and it's all around getting drunk.
okay, that could
Yeah,
get fun. Ha!
it is really a fun game. And so one of the cards means never have I ever. And so if you're the first one out, you have to drink, chug your drink kind of thing. And so I was at a bachelor party. I think I was about 24, and it was half the girls were Christian girls, raised Christian at least, and half of them were raised in a non-Christian home. I was
Mm,
raised in a non-Christian home.
mhm,
And one of it was never have I ever masturbated. At the time, I hadn't. And most of the people there, no matter their religious background, felt shame around it.
mhm,
I just never, I don't know, I had orgasms, like dream orgasms kind of thing.
mhm,
I never had like fingered myself
mhm,
essentially would be how I would say it. Like there was things that felt good, but I
mhm,
never actually intentionally did anything.
mhm.
Um, and there is so much shame around it, no matter the religious background. And it's just so crazy because men are like expected, like you just
Yeah,
like a man is
men
gonna
just
be,
do it. Yeah, exactly.
and if it gets out of control, it's a female's fault,
Yeah, that's
especially in the
shit.
religious church.
Yeah,
Um, so I don't know if that's necessarily Western culture, but it definitely is Christian culture. I personally think it's Western culture altogether. Like, it's the whole rape issue, also. And
hmm
so, yeah. And there's just these stereotypes for everything. And it's really too bad, but it also is something that you have to be able to have healthy conversations around, because otherwise that's when things get scary.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, I love that you're teaching your kids all this stuff too, because it does allow them to feel comfortable around it. And like you
Mhm.
said, like I mean, it opens up doors for them to just feel comfortable in their own skin. I
Mhm.
mean, how many of us growing up struggled with feeling comfortable in our own skin? Like what would have changed if all of us were just like if we all just normalized what our body does, if
Yeah.
we all were just a little bit more curious about it too. Like there literally is nothing shameful
Yeah.
about the human body. Literally nothing. It's
Yeah.
just what we have labeled as a society as these are your shameful parts. These are
Yeah.
parts that if you're a female, you have to cover up. These are parts that if you're a male, you have to cover up. These are parts we don't talk about in certain settings. And it's honestly too bad because it just makes for a lot of adults that continue that shame feeling and
Mhm.
continue to feel those lower level vibrations around certain parts of us
Yeah.
that are actually beautiful. There ain't nothing wrong with dancing in front of the mirror naked. I'm sorry. Nothing wrong with that.
And that's something that I'm very curious about is if there's going to be an age where my kids all of a sudden are like, "Ooh, I gotta cover up," you
Mm,
know, because they're like, I definitely felt like I had to cover up, and that was probably before I hit puberty, but definitely puberty and after, where I felt like no one could see me naked,
mhm,
and which is obviously not the case anymore.
mhm.
But I guess even like around you, I would probably be pretty covered up and all that kind of stuff. And so
Oh, girl, I was on a volleyball and basketball team. It's all coming
I
off.
wasn't though. And so
Yeah.
like I would feel awkward. That would be awkward to me. And me being naked around my mom is still awkward. I hate it. And so those are still things that I have to let go. And so for me, it's really like I got comfortable being naked around my partner, and then I got comfortable being naked around the kids. And I don't know if I was ever not like that all happened very quickly, but I still have that childhood of like I wasn't naked around my friends or my parents, and
Mhm,
everything else is okay and normal. So
mhm.
I'm curious, like Aubrey's going through puberty and Atticus is too. they are not showing any signs of desires to cover up at all. So are they ever going to, or am I going to have 17-year-olds walking around my house naked?
Maybe, who knows?
So,
But the thing is that peer pressure becomes a thing at a certain point,
yeah.
Like that's something for me. Like if my friends were like, oh, I never do that with my parents. Like I never walk around them naked. Like I'd be like, oh, that's not okay. I didn't know that that wasn't okay. I guess I shouldn't talk about this?
Well, and even the one day I had dyed Aubrey's, mine, her friends, and her cousin's hair. And then everyone showed up to pick them up before I was done getting the dye out. So I said, okay, Aubrey and Kalia, her cousin, just go jump in the shower. And they're like, oh, okay. And like two girls, 2 years apart, they've definitely changed, showered lots together. And they come down afterwards, they're like, that was really awkward. And so there still is that context there where like they like are covering up around their friends, around their other people. Um, they go to the swimming pool and they go in an individual changing room, when they go with the school, all that kind of stuff. So there still is that social context where you aren't naked, but in our house, like they're naked all the fucking time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know the answer to that either because I know I have a friend, and this goes back to the shame thing, who she told me stories of how like innocently her and a friend jumped in the shower together when they were kids.
Yeah.
And as a result, things happened, like sexual things. And she felt so much shame around it.
Mm.
And like so much so that like she's married to a man today, but she's like it took her a long time to actually admit to herself and other people that she's like, I'm attracted to men and women. And she's like, I think part of that is because of that experience that I had. And it's like, what's wrong
How
with
old was she when that happened?
what's that?
How old was she when that happened?
I don't know because it's not my story, so I don't really know, but
Because
she was
I had stuff,
younger.
I had stuff like that, where we would like grade 3, 4 probably,
Hmm.
where even grade 5, we would play house. And so we would kiss and we knew what sex was for sure in grade 4. And so we were husband and wife. And so
Hmm.
we didn't have sex, but we were two females doing sexual things that felt good. And
Hmm.
we were in grade 4,
Hmm.
probably, which
Yeah,
is
but
crazy that that's how.
you obviously don't feel the same shame around it that my
Oh,
friend did. So that's the difference. The
well,
shame
yeah.
that is attached to something like that creates this, oh my God, like I can't tell people that I'm either attracted to the same sex or that I did these things when I was a kid because let's be honest, kids like we're curious because
Oh,
we're
yeah.
trying to figure things out. We're trying to figure ourselves out. And
Mhm.
so there's just like so much shame that's put on us in our culture. And it's unfortunate that we grow up in this space where it's like, wait a minute, like why do we have to be so shame filled? How
Yeah.
come we can't just explain things to people? Okay,
Mhm.
this is what's happening. This is what's going on with your body. Like, this is what's going on. You might feel these urges. That's cool. Like, this
Well,
is
that's
just,
why I was
this
curious
is
the
you.
age, because maybe that's where that attraction came in. Like, because for me, I never felt like that made me a lesbian or bisexual. Like,
Hmm.
it felt good, it was fun, but I'm attracted to men. I think women are beautiful. I think women are like more beautiful than men in a lot of ways. I'd rather boobs than a penis every day. Like just like looking wise.
Hmm.
But when I think about having sex, like I would way rather a penis. But so I'm like, there's so many different things there. But I was so young. It was just curiosity. It was
Hmm.
like harmless fun, like, and
Hmm.
to me, like, it's crazy because I don't think I would be comfortable with Aubrey doing that, but she's the same age as I was when I was, and
Hmm.
looking back, like, I don't see anything necessarily wrong with it. And it totally opens up the whole like can of worms of like casual sex and all that kind of stuff. And all of that is just like, I don't know how to wrap my head around that to teach kids.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's difficult because like I don't feel like that like sex, I don't feel like that should be just given away freely, because
no.
that, especially for females, in my opinion, is a very intimate, emotional thing. And just handing that away to anyone casually, I think that that can have its own effects on you. And here's the thing, like it also like that also comes into my pre-programs too, because maybe that's just that I feel shame around that and that
Yeah.
somebody else doesn't. So the thing is like we all have to like see what our own limits and blind spots might be too, because it could just be that I feel shame around that and that's how come I feel that way. But I feel that way because I know for myself sex has been very intimate and I would like to keep it that way. So, and it's very emotionally charged, especially for women. So,
Yeah, for sure. And that's something too, like Aubrey for a while did think that she was a lesbian in grade 3. And that to me, that's just too young to have those
yeah.
ideas.
I don't know because I have a friend who's gay and he said in kindergarten, he's 5, he knew. He knew. I know I don't like girls, I like boys. He knew.
Yeah, I think for her it's influenced by social media.
That's
She
different.
had
Yeah.
she had crushes on 2 different boys through kindergarten, grade 1,
Hmm.
and then it switched in grade 3. So kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3, she had 2 different crushes on 2 different boys, and then in grade 3 it switched to a girl. Or yeah, the very end of grade 3 it switched to a girl. And so to me it's hard for me to be like, oh yeah, you probably had like romantic feelings as a grade 4. I don't know if that, even a grade 3, I don't know if that's possible. But I just was like, it doesn't matter. You
Yeah.
like who you like, you're too young to date, it doesn't
You're
matter.
too young anyways. Yeah, you don't have the full capacity in your brain yet to figure out what you want in a partner. So,
Yeah.
we'll wait till you get there first.
Yeah. Well, and that just opens a whole nother can of worms.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that we have done a really good job of jumping into TMI advice you didn't want as much as possible today. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, definitely. I had to pull myself back from going on a couple of tangents. So I think we're good.
So listen, guys, if you're listening to us on your favorite podcast, leave us a 5-star. We'd love, 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 love to hear from you also. If you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and give us a like, leave us a comment, and go ahead and subscribe because we'd love to hang out with you more. So with that, I think we're going to call TMI Advice You Didn't Want a wrap for today. See everyone next time.